originally during the Mazarab period looked at God as. And in general, Moses didn't say there's no God. Not even the 10 Commandments say that. It says, do not have other gods before me. So really, it's a henotheistic religion, not a monotheistic religion. Henotheism is the belief that there's one God that's your God above all other gods, right? So it doesn't mean there aren't other gods, right?
Yeah, by the way, this is just a really simple connection, but just while we're talking about it, you know the E to A thing? Well, if you do that with Enki to Anki, if you look into Egypt, you know the Ankh key, Anki,
I
Anki,
like that.
the key of life. Yeah. So it's the Ankh key, and I thought that's quite an interesting E to A change there.
Right.
Yeah, because that's supposedly the thing that was allowing them to do, you know, a lot of their stuff. I don't want to say magic, don't want to say technology. Stuff is the way
lithium battery, his Apple Watch. He's got this pine cone. That's the only one that's like, when are we gonna have digital
pine portal opener?
I want a digital pine cone. I feel like that's the future. I don't know what we're gonna do with it yet, but maybe those are all buttons. You know, like it's all buttons. I don't know yet.
So this is an MK Canada. You just didn't include me, and I had to come on later. Jeez, Certus.
And technically, if you go back far enough, it is still Canadian with me involved.
Oh yeah, because British people are controlled by Canada. Oh wait, no, vice versa. Depends on your perspective, really, about Quebec.
Just here to represent the monarchy.
God, that's what people love. All right, well, but when we look into this idea of the tulpa versus the homunculus, here's my next question. So if we're manifesting a tulpa, which is this sort of spirit, that's one thing. But it seems like we're doing more than that. We're manifesting a homunculus because we're creating this thing that's going to be physically corporeal, and it'll control parts of our reality. This is what Ray Kurzweil talks about with the singularity, right? We're going to become one and replace ourselves with the thing that we're building, but we'll be merged with it. So at that point, we're going to be lost.
You merge with the homunculus only after you... Yeah, so you can't even say what you use to make the homunculus on live internet.
Right. They get upset about that. Sure.
I mean, I think that's part of the psyop right now, and the merging of, you know, the worshiping of the duality, as well as pulling people away from their spirituality. And so we have, you know, I won't say how that's manifesting necessarily in our world, but it's happening in Gen Z a lot, in the younger generations right now, where they're, you know, saying that they're trying to get towards this middle ground of not he or she, while actually hyper fixating on, you know, the sexes. And I think this is a big pendulum swing that's happening due to our lack of spirituality.
I fully agree. I like the way that you put that, because you might be able to envision the way things have become in our society. We have, you know, I always love to bring up the world of forms. I'm obsessed with it. We do have the world of forms, and everything that we see, all life forms, they're a secondary expression of something deeper. And people don't like to think of it that way. I heard someone express the human body as its own ecosystem. And it's interesting to think of it that way. Like each individual person is its own ecosystem. And it's hard to think of it that way. But if you think about it that way, well, you might take a lot better care of your body.
It's probably a better word, though, because ecosystem...
I literally just said that, actually, the other day. I literally said those words the other day.
I would say you're a habitat. So hear me out.
Yeah.
Like you're like a riverfront or something like that runs into the ocean, because you're not disconnected from the system, right? There's water runs into you and runs out of you. All kinds of stuff run into you and out of you. So you're more like a habitat involved in an ecosystem, but it's still very important. It's just, I mean to say, like, we are connected still, which I think some people forget, and more we're not. So, you know, maybe very quickly we would become, because of isolation, our own ecosystems. I think that's what the Star Child is in 2001: A Space Odyssey, the idea of complete separation, so that you have to love yourself.
Yeah. Tying into that, Jung talked a lot about the collective unconscious, and I think when he talks about a lot of those concepts, they can be applied pretty generally. Like we could talk about the collective ego. And right now, it's, if we could describe the collective ego, it's like we have this conflict between the collective ego and the spiritual world that's already there. The ego just kind of developed out of our consciousness, and that's the way in which it's unique. And so instead of trying these forces grinding together, we need to find a way to integrate those things in the long run.
And so here's my question. Doesn't it feel kind of synthetic? So we've created anti-religion as a way of controlling people. It feels like, you look, I mean, the Soviets were really big into this. We can control the church, and we can control people's dreams. And that way we don't need the church anymore, because the church is already controlling people's dreams. We need to get them out of the equation. There are people now that run the world that are all obsessed with magic. You can look at, was it JP Morgan, billionaires use astrology quote, like millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires use astrology, right? Because there are the elite who of course have magic. They are obsessed with magic. We've talked about Henry Ford reincarnation, how at 24 he started to believe in reincarnation and urged other people to believe in reincarnation. A lot of the elite are into magic, right? So how is it that the working man is able to be kept away from magic, or the average person is kept away from magic?
I think ego is exactly that.
You know what I'd actually say, sorry to interrupt, I'd say is the pineal gland is the main thing. I know that sounds pretty stupid to put it down to such a simple thing, but I think it is. I think as kids,
pineal gland, yeah.
Well, yeah, as kids, right, we all have. And when I was talking to, I can't remember who it was, I did a stream with someone, we started talking about this, and lots of people commented saying, like, this has brought back memories, which is when you're a kid, you have these dreams, which in the dreams, you build systems to kind of like work your way through the dreams. You'd know you end up in one section, and then you'd open up a certain door to get through to the next section. And then you'd build these kind of paths through dreams. And it's something that most people, when you talk to them, they're like, oh shit, I kind of remember doing something like that. But you stop doing it as you get older. And I think that's like a really important part of it, because we know that when you go into that REM sleep, you're opening the same pathways that's kind of active when you do things like DMT and things like that. You're going into a different realm of consciousness entirely. At that point, it's your brain in charge of your entire reality perception, which I guess at the end of the day is all reality, just a part of your brain. But aside from that, I think the main...
Stefan with a beautiful brain and a beautiful hair says, is rostrophilia, for $10, so to be fair, is rostrophilia pastrosity? Is rostrophilia pastrosity?
You figured it out. You got this.
You deserve the $10 for fucking saying that.
Rostrophilia pastrosity, I think, is a big problem. No, I don't know. We need to look into that, though. I like it.
It's a real word now that XIRTUS has said it.
Rostrophilia pastrosity.
It's been certified.
But
the
I think, like,
pastrification.
Going back to what I was saying is, like, I mean, I've seen studies. I don't want to fucking really say it, considering I don't know the actual scientific stuff behind it, but I've seen stuff about apparently you can get calcification of the pineal gland from stuff like what's in water that we drink, and kind of like yeah, I don't like know too much about that, so I won't like to go into it, but I do know that even without calcification of a pineal gland, I know just ignoring it, it's like, if you never got out of bed and then after 20 years someone just pushed you out and you're just on the floor, like, what the fuck is this? Because you have no clue about what walking is. And that's the concept, really, is that if you don't use this muscle, you forget about it. And I think that ties into what the Bible says about, like, as you grow older, you get further from God. And if you want to enter heaven, you have to have, like, the mind of a child, the innocence of a child. I think it's going literally to the fact that when you first leave the womb or whatever, your brain works in a way that is much more spiritual and much more connected to your pineal gland, because you hadn't experienced reality yet. So all your reality in that 9 months is generated reality by your own, possibly, pineal gland. And then you come out into the world and you slowly forget how to use that thing. And that's why people that are more connected to it naturally seem to have things like visions and, extrasensory perceptions.
And I mean, if you think about it, like when it comes to what they say you need for magic, whether you call it magic, manifesting, whatever, they say you need, an uncalcified pineal gland. And then there's this concept of ego death, which I don't think it's ego death. I think that's a misconception. I think that it's more of a maturation of ego. And then if you look at what's happening in the culture around the world, we're having a calcification of the pineal gland, which is the opposite of what you need for magic. And we have this growing ego problem, which is the opposite of what you need for magic. And, as you were saying about the ego growing out of the consciousness, I think that really what's happened is that people's egos are actually being stunted and are being maintained as immature rather than the maturity that they need, which is what's the misconception behind ego death. It's not that we want it to die, it's that we want it to do its job, when we want everything in our mind to do its job rather than trying to do everybody else's job. And that's where so many people get messed up these days, is that we've got more and more that's calcifying the pineal gland and stunting the ego from maturing at an equal rate to the consciousness, which is born into us before the ego arrives.
It's so wild that you put it that way. Great conversation. It's like the thing. I want to put it this way because I think it's funny, kind of. But we're so worried about AI and if AI becomes self-aware, but it seems like we have this giant ego, and the ego became self-aware, and the ego is doing so much to defend itself out of imaginary forces, a force of self-preservation. And it's what are we worrying about? That's the only way we can actually be healthy about it. So that's a really cool way to put it.
How does one go about decalcifying their pineal gland?
I can only speak from my own personal experience. I think it's just about using it. I mean, I don't know if once it's fully calcified, if you're just fucked. So sorry if that is the case. But for me, it was I had a very traumatic experience happen, which led me to finding hallucinogenics. Something guided me in particular to DMT. And then I kind of went on a bit of a rigorous course of taking that for about 3 months.
If you force alpha methyltryptamine or methyltryptamine, or if you take certain 2-5 dimethoxy-4 phenethylamines, either iodophenethylamine, chlorophenethylamine, methyl or bromophenethylamine, they will force your brain. And there have been studies that show that DOC, DOI, DOB, DOM can be used to treat all Alzheimer's, and it's used to completely reset the brain in certain circumstances. MK Ultra research show that these drugs were very popular with the CIA in order to put someone in, electroshock them, put them in a coma for 30 days to a year, pull them out of it, and then rehabilitate them completely in Canada, right? So experiments. But I was going to say really quickly, the best thing you can do is sunlight. So they say that if you get the sunrise and sunset, if you get that, because the pineal gland is for photosynthesis as well. So you wake up with a little light to it. So correct spectrum light can be very good for your pineal gland.
What's very interesting about that is in, I believe it's Hindu teachings, if you're in sync, then you will wake up 40 minutes before sunrise. And it's in preparation, and then at that point you're supposed to do your mantras at that moment, ready for sunrise.
Well.
Right. Sadhana, well, Kundalini is the Sikh yoga from India, and that's actually the idea. Is it's sadhana, which is usually about 3:30 in the morning here, but it depends obviously because it has to do with the moon and the sun. But I remember in 2000, I had this book for years, right? 2003, I got this book on Kundalini, and then it said it was from the 60s, and it said it'd be good until 2012. And then they had to update it in 2012. And I thought that was really interesting. So in 2012, the Kundalini updated, and they have new rules, and they have different understanding about when you're supposed to do things, and that changed.
What is this XIRTUS light in the background I see?
Dude, Aaron Corbett. Thank you. Isn't it amazing? Thank you.
Aaron, nice dope, man.
Dude, isn't that the coolest? Yeah, thank you, man.
I got sucked back by the flashy lights. I'm gonna go enjoy my shower again now. Bye.
Legit.
Hi, Burn.
Well, okay, but I did want to say, let me go back a bit to the where is it at? Hold on.
And just to put my 2 cents in really quick about decalcifying the pineal gland, making sure that you're not further calcifying it, I find is very important. Especially like I just cut out fluoride, and like he said, using it, because like any muscle, it needs to be used, and then just making sure that you're not further calcifying it is definitely important.
So
Sound vibrations.
All that shit they gave us in elementary school, they were just mind control substances.
Yeah, it's true. Well, everything they give you all your whole life, it feels like. But the other thing that's weird is pineal gland, pine cone, always connected concepts, right? That there's this esoteric connection. All the Jesuits are worshiping the peacock with the pine cone, and the peacock is in the Yazidi tribe. The closer to the correct understanding of shaitan, which we would say Satan, but let's be real, it's not exactly what we were told. And then they've got the idea that shaitan was this peacock that cried an egg, and that was the world in its tear, and that this was the accuser, which gets you back to Enki. So there's something about this idea of the pine cone representing.
I'll also say, by the way, once you open your pineal gland, I think it would be really difficult to reclose it or calcify it, because that's the experience I've had, is that once it opened, it was like everything that I experienced was completely different. A year ago, I would have laughed at the idea. Well, I would laugh at the idea of vibrations, but it is quite as simple as like when you're using your pineal gland, right? And I think, again, this comes back to the Bible. It says once your pineal gland is open, you'll see color. And this is fact. Once you open that, when you close your eyes, you'll never see dark again. And it's impossible for me to see dark anymore. When I close my eyes, it's just colors, stuff's going on. Give it a few seconds, you get visions and everything. It's like literally, that is so true.
But you can easily start to screw up your circadian rhythm, and you can introduce chemicals and salts that will calcify and they will start to solidify and crystallize in your pineal gland. And you can also have, through aging and certain diet problems, supposedly certain kinds of gingivitis, or in your mouth when you get those weird bacteria that make smell, that can cause sleep apnea, which causes diabetes, which also leads, and those things can lead to calcification of your pineal gland. There's all sorts of, this is not medical advice ever, by the way, I don't know if that counts.
But just remember that Wim Hof puts all his stuff down to DMT, and they've done chemical studies on this guy and literally been like, okay, fair enough, he can literally control his body. And if you talk to in his interviews, it's all about DMT. It's just releasing this one thing that's in all of your cells. And now this is one of the craziest things about, since my awakening was the most horrifying experience that I would not want anyone to go through. But since that event, whenever I'm having a moment that, like, either I'm having flashbacks to something, or maybe future kind of event stuff, I will actually taste or smell DMT, and that's because it's in all of your bodily fluids. They've done tests, and it's in
Luke's
mammals.
A full British vampire. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, well, for real. But mammalians literally have DMT in all of our bodily fluids, and I've been trying to work out why I can taste it randomly, and it's because once you've opened your pineal gland,
right,
you will have spikes of DMT.
That's interesting. Have you noticed this, that you taste yourself more, and it's not yourself, it's a tryptophan? When you are on a mushroom or LSD or something like that, you can actually taste the tryptophan in your sweat more. as it's
Yeah, well, that's what it's like for me now when I'm sober. I'm not kidding. Like, I remember when I was first doing DMT, when it was in the early stages, and it was like just fun and like, oh my god, I'm experiencing cool things. I remember being like, I want this feeling forever, and I feel like a monkey's paw twisted its finger in at that moment. Like, okay, and I was like, not ready.
It sounds like a good place to jump off in from eudaimonia, and good spirits into possession, though, again, because, I've got this story. I've always wanted to do designer drugs in the Vatican City where they take altar boys, key emphasis on altar, and then they give them drugs and possess them with demons, and then they chronicle the main older Jesuit.
You want to do this?
I feel like it's an important story to tell, But the more you think about The Exorcist and all these stories, it really is about possession. And we're about to get a bunch of people signing contracts to put Neuralink into their head. How far are we really from possession? Right. And what do you think about that?
Wild shit,
I think there
man.
are plenty of people possessed.
Right.
There are plenty of people possessed already. I think you can do that without magic, with just programming.
So, there's nothing wrong with possession, fellow humans. I also like drinking water and doing human things. Possession is fine.
Well, alcohol is called spirits. I think it's called spirits for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Rob
like...
Zombie makes all these horror movies that are
wait. So I'm technically just drinking souls.
Awesome. When you watch, have you seen like Hellraiser? A lot of these movies are they're rituals in order to create in your mind a place where you visit this realm, and then it manifests it becomes real because you're connected to it, right? This is the idea of a lot of these magicians who make films.
Well, we actually talked about this the other day, didn't we, about one of my great grandparents being connected to Aleister Crowley and one of the founders of neo-Wiccanism in Britain.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm definitely the spawn of a fucking ritual, but I think it must have gone wrong. Someone said something wrong midway, and I just came out alcoholic instead.
You're just like a nicer demon. You're not.
They're like, you're supposed to rule the world, and he just wants to be pissed all the time.
You're the brother of the lesser keys of Solomon's seventh demon, right? Exactly.
Maybe that's what happened with Jesus, though. Maybe they wanted someone evil, and it just came out like, guys, let's just get high.
I mean, Krishnamurti comes up when I think of that as well, because Krishnamurti was a character that the Theosophists wanted to turn into their sort of Antichrist, but of course they thought Christ was cool. Or, I mean, it was not cool. Antichrist would have been a good guy kind of thing.
To be fair, the Antichrist is depicted as being Christ, as in right. A lot of texts actually say that it is. I can't remember the name of the spirit, but it's a spirit that comes out who takes over this person who becomes the Antichrist. It's not the dude himself's evil. It's that a spirit comes out. The spirit is the one that's locked away. He comes out and takes over the Antichrist, which is why the Antichrist could be Christ. It could be this evil spirit taking over Christ, which is a weird way to look at it. But if you look into even the way that they talk about the devil being locked away, that is connected. I can't remember what it is. It's supposed to be he's locked under one of the mountains in Africa. Like, it's an evil spirit that's locked under a mountain in Africa.
Let me do process here. Stefan, for $20. We love you, Stefan. And you do have beautiful hair. I will get you in here, Shaken baby syndrome was first identified and isolated by an au pair in my hometown, Newton. It was all in Massachusetts.
I'm gonna find out.
The baby's relatives bouncing the baby on their knees while singing "Trot Trot" to Boston, "Trot Trot" to Lynn and Noble, Duke of York. That's horrible. So don't shake your baby.
Aren't I the best co-streamer from the bath that you don't even see?
You're in the bath?
Do you have a rubber ducky, Bernie?
I do, but you don't get to see my rubber ducky today. Maybe next time.
This man exists.
In the we were talking about spirits. I think it's related enough. Like, I think a lot about Christianity and Buddhism, and a lot of times magic gets presented. I think it got presented by Damien Eccles, who is polarizing to some people, but he said it's the Western way. It's the Westernized path to enlightenment. That was an interesting way to put it, but that got me thinking a lot about, Western traditions versus Eastern traditions. I actually think at the end of the day, there's a lot of similarities between Christianity and Buddhism. Like, they actually might be far more similar than we realize. When I think about their similarities, I think they both define heaven and hell a little bit differently, but the essence, I think, at the core was actually the same. They just discovered these different, spiritual realms in different ways. And I think what's corrupted Christianity, modern Christianity in a way, I was raised on a pretty conservative form of Christianity, and I think it was a little bit falsified. I think we were raised with the expectation of like, okay, you live and then you die and then you are judged and then you take on a new form of consciousness, and it was very fire and brimstone. But I don't think that's exactly what heaven and hell is. I think if we understand that time is kind of a human construct, like in the grander scheme of things, time doesn't really exist, we can think about the spiritual states for what they really are. You can experience hell on earth, and hell is you gravitating towards that extremely negative and painful spiritual state. And I think if you could, when you compare that to Buddhism, I think samsara can be a very hellish thing. You trap yourself into the cycle. And so I think I could talk more about it, but like, I love the show. There's an episode of the Netflix show. It's called The Midnight Gospel, and that has Duncan Trussell and some of his like podcasts on it. There's an episode called The Annihilation of Joy. And earlier we talked about, the spirit that you carry with you. Like in the episode, the major character that they were following, he has like a bird attached to him. And this bird attached to him
is 9/10 of the law. Twitch 307. That's pretty good.
Yeah. So there's so much symbolism throughout the animation too. The animation is so good. I love it so much.
Actually, interestingly enough, I think what's his name? Something. One of the guys who worked on this show also worked on DuckTales, the new DuckTales.
DuckTales Adventure Time was also shared some animators, I believe.
And there's a pretty interesting magic that goes on in Midnight Gospel. I think Midnight Gospel is kind of underrated if you're looking into the kind of magic stuff that they put out into the public, into the limelight.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I think Christianity and Buddhism really were just different. You were looking at essentially different refractions off of the same crystal. I think that's essentially what it is. And Christianity centers around Christ, and I think the message of Christ, at the end of the day, I think a lot of people take literalism as being superior to symbolic truth, and that's why we get into these fights of like, oh, where's your historical evidence for all these things? And at the end of the day, the real message is that it doesn't fucking matter. Like, the literalist aspect doesn't matter at all, because it doesn't matter if you can document history, because we're going to lose it eventually. What matters is symbolic truth. Symbolic truth is what's more meaningful in your life. That's actually what's going to transform your life. Not understanding exactly what happened during a singular day 2,000 years ago, or if you can document whether, they had nuclear technology 2,000 years ago. Who fucking cares? That isn't what transforms the most important part of your life, which is your spiritual life. And so, yeah, I really want to get I would love to talk to like a seasoned rabbi about the tree of life, because when you see a lot of these traditions, you just see that they're really just rooted. So, yeah.
You got a little quiet there at the end for some reason. Oh, your cat. Sorry. What happened? Your sound went down.
You got muted.
Is that better now?
Yeah, that's
there.
good.
You are.
It was just my microphone. But yeah, I would love.
These are the symbols of 23 symbols of truth. Ostrich feather, we knew that one. I like the ostrich feather. Dharma wheel, little fascist, really, but okay, we let the Buddhists be. Mirror, depends on the person. And biwa, ancient Japanese culture. I want one of these. I'm for it. A dot, I'm for it. Mandala, this is kind of divisive.
That Japanese one
Ooh, and
looked
that's
like
not
something
just...
naughty. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's the Sri Yatra.
Which
Come
is
on, scroll back to keep
That
going.
one is the Sri Yatra.
That
Okay.
one looks like
Oh.
it's for naughty purposes.
I do want it. I want to play music with it. That's all I want to make with it. But
Of course you want.
Sweet
Interestingly
pea.
enough, to me,
Yeah, can you read the one about the sweet pea? I'm
Sure.
doing a project right now where I'm illustrating sweet peas. I've been drawing them all day.
Really? Judging
Yes.
by its name, you may not understand the association, but it is a rather interesting one. Sweet peas are known for their beautiful fragrance. Due to legends and stories surrounding them, they are linked to the concept of truth and strength. In some areas, it's even known to attract new friendships, and that the person carrying these flowers will be the reason that you tell the truth. Over the years, they have come to perfectly portray the concept of truth.
I'm going to be honest, they look nothing like normal peas.
Dude, they look way better than normal peas.
Well, I mean, not as edible.
Why? Because they're pink?
That's the flower.
Yeah, then
Magenta-
it turns into the pea pod.
Well, but because
about
it's a flower, isn't it? Like,
You're just jealous. of
right?
sweet
You're
peas.
telling me I can get pink peas?
Dude, the Malaysian how you
Do
spell
you
it?
just not
Malaysian.
understand how flowers grow into fruit?
Oh, this is just
No,
an
no. I'm
off-topic
just like,
thing.
wait, no.
What I really want to do
Sorry.
desperately. So all around the world, there's all these different kinds of pigeons, and I want to bring the
You
Malaysian.
know, I'm just gonna shut
pigeon-
up.
I just want to breed Malaysian pigeons wherever there are normal pigeons until all pigeons are like this rainbow pigeons. You know what I mean? Think about it.
Pigeons are gorgeous. Even
Right,
the
how depressing is that? The
the
peas
city
are green.
ones.
All right, fine. Sorry for getting my hopes up. You show me something pink and say sweet peas. Of course, I'm going to be like, whoa, they're pink.
British
I
people
like
just
your
want, like,
enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just excited. You know, now,
No,
now
They're
I'm
a
an
beautiful
idiot. All
flower.
right,
They
God,
come in so many different colors.
Interestingly enough, Andreas, someone had just mentioned the ostrich feather, and that was the one
Number one.
bird that they weighed the soul of the
Mhm.
recently disincorporated person.
Oh.
So
Yeah,
that's sorry. I
that-
didn't. I should have explained.
Yeah, that was
Yes.
that was in the episode of Annihilation of Joy. The guy
I
keeps
thought that's
dying.
where Kurt was going
Yeah.
with his.
Let's zoom
He
in.
was-
Here's the feather, and then here's your deeds. Now, here's the fun part. When you get it, so Egyptian mythology, as far as I can tell, is kind of like a seas pass kind of thing to go to heaven. Like you can get in pretty easily, but it's hard. You go there, you've got all of your negative deeds on a superficial level, and then your heart has to do a testimony while you do a testimony. Your heart could scream and be like, he's lying, he did all kinds of horrible things. But if you have a scarab beetle that they gave you with some certain charms on it, you could use that, and it would keep your heart from being able to speak. Your heart would be like, because it's in the dung beetle or something like that. So there's ways that you could get around it, but that would be your soul versus your, what's the other kind of soul? Because you have 3 souls, right? You have like an animal soul, like in the Golden Compass, right?
Right, and then there's a ka.
That's what I mean, the ka, right? And then what will happen is if you're good, you don't get eaten by alligators and jackals, which tear you apart, right? Otherwise, your soul gets to go to the
Yeah, that creature there, I can't remember the name of that creature, but it has the head of a crocodile and the forefront of a leopard and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus.
Yeah, I love.
Wait,
different
doesn't
symbolism.
it have a name?
Sobek, right?
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Sobek is cool, and you can see in San Jose, California, at the Rosicrucian Museum, a whole whopping bunch. I think there's like a dozen Sobeks.
It kind of reminds me of that one that was in Moon Knight as well. What was that one called?
In the late
so-
period, Sobek became Sobek Ra, which is interesting because then you've got this. This is probably a realistic creature that existed, right? If you really look into it, there were, because reptile birds and in between animals like this did exist. So this is probably something that actually existed in the same way that Seth, Egyptian god, Seth is not necessarily a dog. He's this other animal that's probably
It's an
extinct.
aardvark. It's an aardvark.
Yeah, apparently it's Armit.
Oh.
You're super convinced it's Arthur?
Armit is the god I think I was thinking of. I don't know if that's
I'm pretty sure Seth has the head.
wrong.
of a
It's
crocodile.
Armit with AMMIT.
I wouldn't be surprised if Arthur's set. That actually would bring a lot of closure to me in PBS. Actually, right? He's evil. I don't know. All right, but
Look up Amit for me.
Oh, how you spell it?
I think it's AMMIT, or is it one C?
Amit. Oh, okay. Amit.
Is that the one? It is, isn't it?
Dead. There it is.
There you go. I knew it. There you go.
Well
it's not
done.
from Moon Knight. It's Amit.
10 more points to the Rosicrucians and to Luke. The Devourer of the Dead also rendered Amut, or the Ahamayit, was a goddess in ancient Egyptian religion with the forequarters of a lion, the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, and the head of a crocodile.
See, so whilst I might not know fruits, I do remember things from Moon Knight, all right? So not entirely useless.
No, that's pretty fair. Yeah.
Sorry, in my human design, they call my motivation guilt, which means that my whole point and purpose to my dharma is to point out what's not working to then have things work better. So that's just... Although, speaking of Rosicrucianism and the three souls, a lot of what we study in Rosicrucianism is the difference between spirit, soul, and vital life force.
Well, what are the difference between spirit, soul, and vital life force? What does that mean?
Well, I mean, I guess the best way that I would explain it is there's the difference between the part of you that is God, source, spirit, cosmic consciousness versus the vibrational energy that makes us alive versus like a secondary form of that. So like, you know, we have our soul that we take with us, you know, from incarnation to incarnation. And then there's, you know, that soul is imbued with what it's connected to source consciousness. And then there's vital life force, which is just the energy that we're imbued with to be alive and conscious. So, you know, more than humans have vital life force, is where not everything has spirit or soul.
So what happens when we build machines that do, right? And this is kind of in the symbol even of the Rosicrucians. I don't know if I can find it off the top. I'm trying to find it. You know what I'm talking about?
I would say that we can't build machines, like in that sense, according to the Rosicrucians, you can't build a machine that then has a soul, because you can't imbue a machine with...
Let's try using ice.
I mean, isn't that what the symbol is? Here's a picture of the Rosicrucian Collegium Fraternitas, which is they've built a living church, right? Isn't that kind of the idea, that they're manifesting the spirit? Like it's a shared spirit that's manifested. It's almost Shintoistic.
Well, consciousness and spirit or soul are different things in that sense. You know, something that has consciousness does not, you know, that would be more like vital life force consciousness, is where, you know, being a piece of source consciousness is different than having consciousness.
So we can't create soul because technically the word soul is the breath of God or something. I mean, maybe we can breathe someone else. We can take God's breath.
The only way we can create soul is by making the love. Correct.
Interestingly enough, this is really on point, because as a Vaishnava myself, I practice pranayama, which is a yoga based on the fact that all of us share the breath of Brahma, the creator. Okay.
Tell me what's the world with no soul.
And check it out. I've actually become so much more psychically proficient and have ridiculous intuition and had premonitions in my dreams. And, you know, it's not a technology of yoga recommended for everybody, but, you know, for those of us that are prepared to get clairvoyant, it's definitely a boost. It's like a jump start.
Absolutely.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to make a commentary on the word yoga, but please, I'm joining late, so I'll go second or not at all.
No, go for it. I've had plenty of time to talk.
The joke I make is if someone tried a yoga class and said they didn't like it, it's almost like saying you tried popcorn and you don't like food. And so when you talk about yoga in general, in America, what that means to us is a physical exercise practice, whereas to people in another country, it might be white or pink or red tantra, which could be perceived as sex work, just because there's contact between two individuals. I mean, yoga was invented because the Kama Sutra was eventually outlawed. You know, you're
And
not
you're right,
allowed to draw
work,
sex.
what about yoga eating? You know, there's all kinds of the yoga cookbooks about yoga sex work. Okay, you're right. That's what people want to hear. Good point. Keep going.
It was the Nielsen dial went up and down. He's yoga sex. Oh.
No, even as I noticed it, look at it. Like here, even look at this yoga food picture. It's about sex. So keep going. Sorry.
Well,
Yeah,
that's advertising. Advertising is about sex.
What have I just come back to?
What did I just come into too? Oh my!
I just rolled a spliff and came back and just came back like, this is sex. Yoga is sex. Look at this picture. Sex. Okay, cool.
Oh my! Oh,
Stefan, elaborate. There was more to that argument.
I have to keep unmuting myself here. It's like having a trigger discipline, so to speak. But
yeah, I will mute myself again. You carry on explaining how this is sex.
Well, there is. I mean,
give me a moment to get my earphones unstuck from my head.
Obviously, originally it was probably the way that it was advertised to the West in the 19th century. It was yoga was the Kama Sutra. Of all the sutras, which sutra have you all heard of? Be quiet. You know what I mean? You've all heard the Kama Sutra. That's it. Every single one of you. So I just feel like we've kind of lost the argument.
Oh, I thought of like a medical sutra.
You all right? Look at you.
It's funny you say that because actually I have this long joke because before I actually like started practicing Kundalini, I would always get Kundalini and Tantra mixed up. Like I didn't know there was a difference between the two. So like whenever I'd hear someone talk about Kundalini, I was like, "Oh, you fucking perverts."
Dude, I mean, I thought that was really funny when I met you because I had a friend, my friend Zach, who I always called Billy, and he was like, "You're not allowed to do Kundalini at my house." And in fact, when you start doing that, you can't come over anymore because he read up on it and he heard about pseudo death and he thought it was, oh, this is dangerous stuff, you know.
Thou shalt not breathe heavily in the corner.
Yeah, I mean, like,
because it makes me have sexual thoughts about you. No, I mean it's because you must be having sexual thoughts. No, sorry. Yeah, I think your eyes look pretty, and therefore you must be gay. No, sorry.
Yoga might do that to some people, but I think it's true that it's a lifestyle in and of itself. There are prayers, there are singings, there's muscle work, there's all kinds of things, and exercises while you're breathing. It's only a small part of it, but it's the part that's been emphasized since the 1960s in America, right? Or what?
Well, the part that's been emphasized is the fitness part. Actually, it's funny. I just dropped a Guru Jagat clip into my latest video here on YouTube, talking about, you know, the yoga that we know is not really the spiritual practice of yoga, at least certainly not in comparison to Kundalini yoga. And
historically, yoga was also for the most troubled individuals in the communities, which was the young men, which is why it's for women in America now today. Sorry, I didn't say that out loud. I just thought it. You guys heard
it. You did.
But I mean, I do a lot of yoga. I used to do a lot more yoga than I do. I'll admit that. But at one point, I talked to this guru guy, and I mean, I asked him, I said, "Do you think it's kind of messed up that Americans are doing yoga for physical fitness and for the materialism of making their bodies prettier?" You know, and I had my supplied answer, like, "Of course that sucks." And look, Andreas, you're so much cooler because you're doing it for deeper reasons. I love you. No, but the answer I got wasn't that. It was, it doesn't matter why they practice yoga. Get them to do it.
To deepen the gas tank. So most of other forms of exercise, drain your gas tank and you fill it up by eating and resting. But in the process of metering out your energy and trying 110% to not go above 75% exertion so you don't overheat and you can kind of, yeah. So when you say in America, this, that, or the other, it depends on what communities and circles you walk in. You know, sure. Some people have never, to reference the comment I made about trot, trot to Boston, trot, trot to Lynn, and the nursery rhyme of Noble Duke of York. This is a game when I was little, and even with my little cousins, I remember doing it. You put them on your knees, and Noble Duke of York, he goes up the hill, he goes down the hill, and you're bouncing the kid all around, and he's doing this, and it's like something, you know, that causes shaken baby syndrome. Let's put it that way. And so the reference I'm making, though, is camels and horses. Paul Revere rode a horse because he had to go fast. And the horse might die when you get there and it falls over, but you got there. Whereas a camel, if you have a pregnant woman and you need to transport her quickly, camels have a better gait. There are certain horses that can use gaits that don't cause this. Yeah.
Camels are the best. Let's be real. Camels are awesome. Have you ever seen a camel's foot? I know that. Never mind.
You can make a
Well,
joke about yoga pants.
You're allowed. All
That
allowed.
reminds me on my mom's side, who is German. We had this thing with little kids who were bouncing on the knee type thing, and there was like a chant or a poem, and it goes Shaka Shaka Heide, Felder in the Heime, Felder in the Busch, Felder in the Rheine, which means we're shaking the baby up and down. He fell out of the bush and into the Rhine River.
Why do
Sounds
I feel
about-
like
sounds
I
about
just
right,
walked
no.
into a Hitler Youth fucking thing?
Well, not necessarily.
That's
It goes
like-
back
that's like-
older. It's even older.
that-
That's the thing.
You know, that's like you know, like sort of like really acclimating a child to trust.
Well, and what does a culture do? It identifies its weakness, turns it into a weapon, and then uses it against its enemy. So that's why people from Boston sing those songs.
Well, and that's literally what I started this whole thing off saying, was that, you know, they take something that we're already doing as human beings and then they psyop it on us. So like with yoga, you know, they took
That
the
slippery
ego
slope.
that was already developing and associated, you know, yoga with ego rather than decalcifying your pineal gland by
Very
chanting with it. They got everybody to just shut up and exercise rather than
And
doing any
why
of
do you
the
think
other
other people have that
Female
perception?
sexual
Is that based
yoga.
on your own experience with it, or
Yeah.
okay? So you realize other people's experience with how they found yoga and when they found it
Oh,
and
no,
what it did for them
absolutely.
might be very different.
No,
than that.
I'm saying the norm. Like, you
Well,
know,
what is it-
like
what is
there's
normal?
a difference between what is
think most
normal.
Amer- I don't
The
think most
average
Americans are-
experience.
Is gender binary normal?
Yes.
'Cause I think that's well.
Yes,
Well, then I don't believe in normal.
that's fine. It's an empirical fact.
I
You
like
don't have to
circles
believe
and
in it.
triangles, but the point is the same. That around America, I don't think most people are finding yoga because of the most esoteric reasons. I mean, this article proves it around not just America, around the world. Look at this female section of Daily Mail. Would you spice up your sex life with spells? Mom of one reveals how she healed her struggling marriage with sex magic. This is beyond yoga. This is straight back to magic. Sex is the way that in physicality, the idea of being loved, I think maybe even more broadly, is why we do a lot of things.
Well, how did Stella get her groove back otherwise if it wasn't sex, magic, and yoga? I mean,
Yeah. So like sexuality, I think the idea is that your sexuality is one of the most potent forces in the universe. It's literally, well, it's a force that creates life, and the force that creates life is, you know, the most powerful thing in relevance to what we know. It's like all we know is just the creation of life, and that's why we're here. So like if you find ways to channel that in the correct way, and I think a
see,
good
Mr. Cash Machine. I mean ATM. Sorry, I dropped bits as kind of a variation on the same concept. But I also was raised to think that women had magic between their legs. And then when you realize that it's available for 2.5 minutes for $20, it's not. Sexuality is not the most important thing in the world. When you've been brainwashed in a Puritan society, you fear women more than you fear God, and then that leads to deifying your partner, and then it doesn't lead to successful marriage ever.
Right.
Yeah, I think
absolutely.
there are different
This
ways.
is true because of sexual repression in religion. Also, I would pull back to, but keep going.
Oh yeah, there are different ways to interpret
I think
it.
I'm agreeing with you, Mr. ATM. But
yeah.
Nice to
it's
see you.
like-
I think we've been on stream before once together, maybe.
Well, I think there's a way the public has interpreted sexuality, and I think that's now at this point in my life, I see things like pornography like way different than I did, because it almost seems like things like pornography, they're like wasted magic. You know what I mean?
When you say the public perception, again, it's this idea that, which is that form of speech. I wish I could abolish it from my. But for me, I had an experience where I taught yoga while I stared at the ceiling and didn't interact with the students directly, and then bridged that divide in the yoga fitness setting, and then went to massage school training. And then you realize that, right, skin and nudity, even in the bathing suit areas, and touch, even sensual touch, is still not sex unless you need it to be. And you could interpret, like, where do the genitals end? I don't know. Everything's connected by nerve endings. So I've heard people say
I'd
their
like
entire
to
body is a genital.
apologize. I'd like to apologize for my
Please enter
previous
ancient Historia.
outburst. I'm sorry for laughing so hysterically. It was just the point that you said women had magic between their legs. I couldn't contain it anymore.
Thank you for laughing.
No, really.
A lot of times on this channel, it's such a quick back and forth. No one actually laughs at the jokes, but we've got enough of us here that.
Oh yeah, no, that destroyed me. That one.
Wait, they
I was
don't
laughing,
have
you
magic
just couldn't
between
hear
their
it.
legs. That's not the portal for life. The belly button is. It's called the Pleasure Canal. Who called it the Birth Canal?
I didn't expect this. You know, it's 3 a.m. here, but it's great. It's great.
I hopped in late. I'm trying to play catch up. You know.
Oh no, it's all good, man. You know, you do you. Be
But yeah,
yourself.
I'm honored to be welcomed in. I'll shut up.
I know. I just wanted to, though, it's not just a joke. It's really true that sexual repression is used in religion and culture in order to, at first, religion uses it to control you. And now culture says, hey, you're not sexy enough to be loved unless you buy our product, which is a kind of a gross simplification of it. But they really do kind of figure out how to implement you in the system that way. It's also in school. You want to be popular. But it is a corporatist solution. Like, how do you get someone popular? Well, they have to learn how to find sugar for the anthill creatively on their own in ways other people can't, so that they're an asset, right? And sexuality.
Catch more flies with sugar than honey, or sugar than vinegar.
This is why I think everyone should learn to be alone. And I kind of think how churches, in one way, had it right. You know, and they like tell priests not to get married. I feel like that was actually, they were a bit on the money with that one, because
they
it
were
was
the
just
only
like,
ones who lived past age 40.
no, but it's just kind of like, mate, you've got a duty, and like I kind of get it. Like, I've had relationships in the past where I genuinely thought like, oh yeah, I can't wait to have kids and like settle down, and like, you know, if I'd have actually lived that life, I'd be in a living nightmare right now. And I just think
I let both my siblings go first with the
So
marriage
that
and having
you know, nobody has sex and then they rape the kids.
But there's no better example than a bad
Jesus.
one. So, you know.
But I just mean like, if you know, if the opportunity's there for you, then you're gonna go for it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes,
so
they're gonna
if
go for the children every time.
Is that impulse control, or
well, isn't no?
that's the practice of giving massage to people that you're attracted to, and
No, but I
or
mean, like,
friends
if you
helps
spend
separate
time
that,
with
maybe.
somebody, you know what I mean, somebody that you're attracted to, somebody that you know gets you, eventually you become codependent, and your life changes, your future changes, like your view of what you want changes. Whereas when you're completely independent, if you don't have that exterior influence, who you want to be and what you want to be is kind of undiluted. So I think that
Is it Tupac Shakur, Machiavelli? Is that you? No, sorry.
but you have to be able to mix that, don't you? Like, obviously we are living a human life, so you have to be able to say, well, I should indulge in some of the human things, which is the argument between lower and higher consciousness, isn't it? The lower consciousness is the animalistic wants and needs, and the higher consciousness obviously above that. So I think, you know, it's that wrestle, isn't it, between who am I? Am I this or am I that? And kind of allowing yourself. I think that's the biggest part of being at peace with yourself, is understanding that that animal side of you isn't something you can just abandon, in the same way the ego isn't something you can just abandon. It's something that you have to learn to work for you. And I think that's
I statements. No, sorry,
but that's just a part of it, isn't it? It's like, you know, we're whatever way you want to look at it. I personally see it as like we're in avatars. I'm not 100% on that view at the moment. I think we're all one consciousness living it out in different bodies.
Well, my self-portrait there, right? Positive, negative, spy versus spy. Which one? You know.
Well, that's kind of how I see it at the moment. I'd love to be wrong, because my ego wants to be individual. My ego wants to say like, no, this is me. And then as well, like the side of me that doesn't want to admit that maybe my family aren't real, you know, like that is like more important to me than me. Like, fuck me. The biggest shock to my world would having to be admitting that like my family members were just other versions of me. That'd be horrifying, which I think is
blood-related
like one of the biggest
acquaintances.
struggles.
That's my brother used to refer to family time as planned silence with blood-related. I'm going,
well, I mean, it's different for different people, isn't it? But like my dad passed away last year, and you know, my mum is, you know, is probably my favorite person on the planet. And it'd be horrible, wouldn't it, to imagine like, oh, they're just me all playing parts in a movie.
Well, that's what
so
Descartes.
I think,
you know, it's to build on the foundation. Only thing you can really rely on is that you exist, and anything outside of that, even that I exist in this form, is built on things that can be deceived.
It might be worth, I mean, we're at the 2-hour mark, but like, because I can't help myself, and you brought up monogamy and Contra, essentially, there's this idea of monogamy associated with magic, and that's only certain sorts of magic. Actually, a lot of the time, the idea of possession and demons spreading through polyamory is something that you're warned about in a lot of magic as well. Even before diseases, people were worried about demons.
Yeah,
So-
I got groomed into talking about polyamory because I was following Aubrey Marcus, and he,
right.
And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, I find myself
Right.
talking about it to people and not realizing that they might be in a more impressionable place than I am in that conversation. Or,
But it's interesting because people as a partnership working together over a lifetime in order to create some sort of magic, and they have the alchemy of childhood and family. I mean, these things that sound super square and conservative are also super woo and out there, that we're using alchemy.
And I love Aubrey Marcus, by the way. Yeah. Anyways.
Little culty,
but Tantra, as far as offering some sort of educational thing, maybe again, only 15 seconds, but you hear Tantra.
I actually love Aubrey,
and you hear like ooh, icky sexual energy. But there's white Tantra, pink Tantra, and red Tantra. And in certain places, again, when you start defining it beyond yoga, it's like white Tantra is from the neck up. So you're focusing all this energy and recycling it here. But if that's how you live, like Shakespeare, Victor Borg said, from here he was a bust. And then pink Tantra allows that energy to go down maybe to the creative center, and then it might escape to the root chakra. But, red Tantra,
in a movie,
red Tantra is like grinding your hips and like vocalizing and purposefully channeling that energy without contact, potentially.
Is Bernie still in the bath?
That's a long bath. I don't know. Well, we're at the 2-hour mark. Let me say goodbye to you guys. It's been really great that you've been here.
Oh, wait. Thanks a lot, man. Thank you.
1 second. M Fisher for 10 euros. Wow, I do like euros. Are prettier. Hop Reitzer, wenn wollt, dann schreit fällt. In den Graben. Fressen in the Raben. German tales and rhymes are often very morbid and dark. Much love from Cologne, Germany. Sorry, I butchered that.
We're definitely not in the bath and fully dressed, all right?
Whoa.
Yeah, full conspiracy.
I feel like that's how Krigler should be dressed on stream. 40 degrees.
Negative 40 degrees.
Well, it was lovely to meet you all.
Canada sucks.
Let me
UK Canada conclusion. It's too freaking cold here.
Make sure you check out Ancient Historia. Luke's channel is here. American Time Machine, Kurt's amazing music that you have to listen to. Stephanie Scott, I think greatest artist on Instagram as far as I'm concerned, and you're changing the world. Yeah, I like that Justin Trudeau has to walk by your symbology. That's powerful. Keep doing it. That's awesome.
It's like smoking a real cigarette instead of an e-cigarette. It's retro. I call it so like a real artist who uses like media instead of a computer.
Yeah, you're like an actual cigarette. That's a line, Stefan. But and Blackwood, holistic, balanced Blackwood is the way I recall it. Balanced Blackwood, and you should definitely subscribe. She does some pretty awesome videos. I'm pretty interested in some of the magic stuff you're talking about, and as well as the Rosicrucian and the spiritual war and language. Man, you're talking about so much stuff. Really underrated, amazing content right here. So guys, go subscribe, guys and gals, and everything in between. Circles and triangles, go subscribe and listen to the latest video on starseeds because you might be one. If you're here, chances are.
Well, that video is actually about how you're not a starseed. The whole point of that video is that you have just as much of an important mission on this earth, even though you're not a starseed. You're just a soul extension, but that's just as good.
I'm a big fan of that.
Because we get real up in this shit.
I learned this about in Denmark that you are not.
Do you have a video on how to tell if you're a god or not?
No, not yet. But
God
I guess I
being a
could.
human. God.
And is there anybody else I'm missing that you guys want to share some? Like Kit, I love that you're here. I know that you were silent. We need to get your microphone working so we can talk about the gypsies that live in America. Alabama?
Yeah, bring me back to that conversation.
In Massachusetts, there's a place called Ipswich. Oh, sorry, Ipswich, which apparently is a alternate word. Like IP switch is instead of GYP or EGYPT. So.
Gypsy. Oh my God. Never thought about
There's
it.
something called the Ipswich Fright. If you want to look into interesting Massachusetts history you've never heard of, but the Ipswich Fright.
Anna Day Afro, do you have a link you want to share with anybody?
Just my art site, which is QUE N as in Nancy YAN.net. That's the gallery of my art and my writing.
Quenya AI.net. Like that?
QUENYAN.net. That should bring it up. And there's a guest book if you feel so predisposed to sign that you've been there.
Hit it wrong. QUEN.
QUENYAN.net.
AN.net. There you
When
go.
you figure it out, send it to me.
The Queen of
Yes,
New York.
please send everybody go. Everybody go
I'll
and
put
sign the
this-
guest.
I'll put this in the description as well, and make sure you check out Crypto Alchemist, Bernie.
And I've never had something to promote, but I just signed up for. I made my own Twitter account. I've been tweeting out little bits and dropping bits and of information. There's a tip function there. So my only job necessarily, if I get enough patronage through the Twitter account, I'm not sure everyone has that feature. You might have to update the app or go digging for it. But
hey, look, I don't follow.
You got to add an Ethereum
instead of stepping on the YouTube space channel with income, I'm in it on a different platform. And if you want to support, if you like the tweets that are there, you can not send any money, and I'll probably keep tweeting anyway.
Legit. Well, all right. I love you guys. Thank you all for being here. And
Likewise.
We love you, Xertus. We love
See you later,
Xertus.
guys.
It's been certified.
So I was silent.
Heck
I was
yeah.
just afraid that my internet.
This
would be
next
too
story
slow.
has been suppressed by
Like everything
mainstream
else, but
media. Let's go to
enjoyed being
Andreas
here.
for
Thank
more.
Sadnam.
Everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Hello. Welcome to the XIRTUS. Tune in for another exciting episode of wonder, imagination, and discovery.
Recent Tartarians. Recent
Она образует
Tartarians.
всеобщие закономерности, определяющие законы классической физики для нашего
Sometimes I
мира.
look at the moon and just think, the skin's beautiful. Baby, when I met you, there was peace unknown.
Что касается энергии нано, то она превышает ядерную в немыслимое число раз. 10 в 74 степени.
That's it. That's it. That's it. With your arms now. That's it. That's it.
Thank you for watching XIRTUS. Keep listening. Remember, if you enjoyed the video, please follow and subscribe and share and support. It really helps. Coming up next, XIRTUS.
By the way, that's gone. If you didn't record that, that's gone forever. It's gone.